Hello, my name is Vint Cerf. I'm Google's chief Internet Evangelist. But what I'd like to talk to you today is work. Work is changing, and it has been changing for many, many years as new technologies have developed. New kinds of work have had to be created. Some people are looking for work because they want to be paid. They need money in order to live in most of the societies that populate our planet today. In many, many centuries ago, perhaps before money was invented, there was a kind of barter society. You made something and someone else made something that you were interested in, but you had to find a whole series of transactions before you could trade for the thing that you wanted. Money is a very powerful alternative. It represents value and it can be used in direct transactional exchanges without having to go through intermediary kinds of barter. Work is also something which is created by technology. And so, one of the things that my colleagues and I have been studying for the last several years is this notion of innovation and its impact on jobs. We know that innovation sometimes destroys jobs because some new innovation might remove the need for a human being to do a particular kind of work because it's become automated. The Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, or 18th and 19th centuries, had that impact. Many, many jobs disappeared, but at the same time, these new technologies often create new kinds of work, new kinds of jobs. And I think that's true today. Many people are very concerned about automation. They're concerned about computers and robots and things like that, somehow self-driving cars, other things that essentially take over work that human beings had to do in the past. Artificial intelligence is often raised as a potential hazard for people who use their brains to carry out their work. I think, however, that many of these fears, which were common during the Industrial Revolution, are in fact not well founded. And what you discover is that as new innovations occur, as new technology comes along, there's a new kind of support that's required in order to make that technology useful and reliable. And so someone has to design the new machines, someone has to maintain those machines, someone has to maintain the environment in which those machines will work. So, for example, an electric motor is not very useful if there's no electricity. Creating electricity and distributing it generates a lot of jobs because there's a lot of infrastructure involved. The same argument can be made as we look at our very computer oriented world today, where there are a lot of artificial intelligence or at least automation takes place as a result of computer programming. Well, programmers are needed to write the programs. Other people are needed to maintain the power generation and distribution and communication systems that are needed in order to make those computers useful. And think of all the apps that you have on your smartphone and think about the industry that's been created making the smartphones and maintaining them and inventing new ways to use them. So, my general belief is that work, while it will change over time, is not going to evaporate just because of innovation. It's fair to say as well that the kind of infrastructure that's needed in order to support today's very sophisticated kinds of work, it also leads to a potential hazard. And the hazard is not that you run out of jobs. The hazard is that the ecosystem becomes increasingly complex and potentially increasingly fragile. And so, if you can imagine for a moment that a great many jobs today involve communications over the internet. When the internet isn't there, suddenly there are things you can't do. There are no alternatives. And so, maintaining that infrastructure becomes very important. The same could be said, certainly, for the electrical network and our ability to place electrical energy where we need it, for example, in the form of batteries. So, as a simple example, I wear two hearing aids and they have tiny little batteries. And these very expensive hearing aids would be worthless if somebody stopped making the tiny little batteries that I have to use to make them run properly. And so I'm very, very dependent on somebody deciding to make those batteries. Otherwise, my thousands of dollars worth of hearing aid are useless. And so there's this interdependency, which is increasingly apparent in the 21st century, where a great deal of infrastructure is needed in order to make things function properly. Goods have to be delivered, have to be available in a reasonable amount of time. One could make the same argument for food. In the earlier parts of the 20th century, in America anyway, a very significant fraction of the population was busy farming in order to generate food not only for themselves, but also to sell to other people. And this significant fraction of the population, which might have been 30, 40, 50% or even more, is now down to about 2% or so, thanks in part to automation, to machinery that does the work that humans used to do. Uh, on the other hand, all the people that used to be farmers are now doing a great many other jobs. It is sometimes asserted that the jobs that will exist 5 years from now didn't exist today, and that a significant amount of work will be new work, requiring new skills. And that brings me to one other very important point in this rather long monologue, and that is that education and the learning of skills is going to be essential in order to keep up with innovations. On top of that, increasing lifetimes, which we've been observing for the last 100 years or so, means that you may end up with multiple careers over time. And so the idea that you could go to school, get a college degree, and then work and then retire is going to have to change into something like continuous learning, where new skills are learned in order to do new jobs that come along, and that because you might live to be 100, you might work for 70 or 80 of those years, you will probably have multiple careers doing multiple kinds of work and needing new kinds of skills and knowledge. And so, once again, of course, we hope that the internet will have a role to play in providing some of that knowledge. Nonetheless, the important point is that we are going to have to learn for our lifetimes and not just once in the early stages of our lives. So as you can see, I'm optimistic that there will be plenty of new work to be done, but the work will be different than it has been in the past. And that is the important message, which is that we have to prepare ourselves to learn on a continuous basis to keep up with innovation. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for letting me join you. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, so you'll have to make do with virtual Vint. But in the meantime, perhaps our paths will cross on the net.